Yeah, I cut myself shaving. Basically, I was trying to dress up and impress you. Is it really obvious? Yeah, come on, you're a writer. You know what it's like on the tough streets of being a macho. Right. Anyway, hello. I'm William Gallagher, and this is 58 Keys, which, as ever, is for writers like you and me who use switchblades, Mac iPhones, and iPads. And this time it's about a writer slash musician slash producer slash bass guitarist who uses all of this Apple gear to very great effect. You and I are about to meet Dez Tong, perhaps previously best known for Sad Cafe. I mean, out of all the things he's done, perhaps that, but not after this. After this, no. Dez Tong is going to be revealed to you forever as a Mac fan. Dez Tong, thank you so much for being on 58 Keys. Real treat to have you here for this. Especially because actually, I don't think we do enough interviews with writers on 58 Keys, but what we have never once done before is have a musician writer on. And this is partly because I know absolutely nothing, zero, about writing music or songs or anything that musicians do, except I know mostly through you that Macs are an amazingly important part.
Well, I'll take you right back actually to the beginning when I first got into using computers to write, which was mid '80s when it was in its infancy. Atari brought out the 1040, which was 1 megabyte, not 1 gigabyte. What 1040 was 1 meg memory. And if you were lucky, you had a 4 meg external hard drive that you could use. But they were the first to incorporate a MIDI interface. So the keyboards that you used, which worked on musical instrument digital interface. So it's a cable that runs from the back of the keyboard into the computer, which streams out data. So when you play a note, it records that note as a specific MIDI note into the sequencer that you've got. Atari were very clever. They brought out a machine that actually incorporated it. So you didn't have to have an external unit to be able to do that. So they all of a sudden became the industry leaders. Floppy disks you actually recorded on. The nightmare was that you would go blasting through an incredible sequence and it would crash and you'd lost everything. You got into the habit extremely quickly of doing something, save it. Because I know so many musicians who use them as frisbees because they would have done something absolutely incredible and it went in an instant, boom, it just went. So that was early days. But I was really into it by then. I got a job at a computer games industry place called Silicon Dreams down in Banbury, where I was hired as as musical director for the company. But I also had my own studio where I wrote music for games. And at that time, the games industry had swapped from they'd gone from cassettes to floppy disks, and now they were onto CDs. And CDs gave them the opportunity to put real instruments and real singers and anything like that, orchestras, onto the games because they had so much space. Up to that point, they were using tiny little chips to make the music. Now they actually had a whole CD to fill with sound files, WAV files. And I was presented with a Mac system with a very early Pro Tools. Now, Pro Tools was, at that time, just basically for recording instruments, voices, and so I got a guitar player in, I got a sax player in, I got a friend of mine in to do vocals. And it was recorded into there and it came up as waveforms and you could edit it and cut and paste and do whatever you wanted. But the biggest problem was that they couldn't find a way of syncing that particular piece of software to the sequencer, which would be on another machine, where you would be using your keyboard to play in, to create music. And the idea was, and they always said, oh yeah, no, it's no problem. All you have to do is this. I'd had numerous phone calls with them saying, it doesn't work. Oh, it does, all you got to do is this, do. It never did. And I only found out a few years ago that it never did anyway. So you had this massive problem of trying to sync the two of them so they would run in parallel. So you could have the programmed music running alongside the real music that you're recording, so you could mix it together.
Except, hang on, that means that was just sounded incredibly frustrating. The floppy disks, I'm not going to say you could kill people over it, but it was neither of it was very smooth, and yet there was enough benefits in using technology that you stopped whatever you did before and went straight into computers. What was the?
Yeah, but it's the thing about. I mean, I'll freely admit I'm not a keyboard player. I'm a bass player. I play a bass guitar, but the fact that I had a computer and the software that enabled me to write into that computer enabled me to play the piano that I had in my head that I wanted to play, and I could do it in stop time. So I could actually do it. If I wanted to play a chord, I could actually go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 individually, and then edit it so it would sound like, like a proper chord. And so, I mean, I wrote a whole album like that, which ironically was released last year by a company who specialise in retro music. I wrote it with my friend who you know. We recorded it in 1987, and we put it onto tape. You recorded it onto tape in those days, because you didn't have the storage facility. Here's a classic example. I had a sampler. At that time, samplers were coming up, and I had an emulator sampler, and it had 32 megabytes of memory. And I wanted to expand it because at the time I was doing huge soundscapes for TV and some films and things like that. And I wanted to be able to have like a 5-minute piece of sound effects or piece of music running all the way through. But the 32 megabytes didn't give me enough memory. So I went to my boss at the time and I said, I need to upgrade the memory in my emulator sampler. And I need really and truly, I need to about 128 meg would be perfect. And 128 megabytes of basically little memory blocks that you put in the back was something like £250. 128 megabytes, £250. You can buy a terabyte system now that is the size of my thumbnail for about 50 quid. So that just shows how far we've come with it. So we went through all that. The fact that you were always struggling for memory. Memory was king. You always wanted more and more memory. I mean, I suppose it's no different nowadays in as much as, when you're doing films and things like that, you're getting mega files, and especially if somebody's sending you raw data of film and everything like that, it's huge. But in those days, for instance, that just cut out there. So that's Logic that's running on there now. And I use Final Cut Pro 10 on all on my MacBook Pro. So, and I've got Motion 5, and they all sync together. They all link. You can do something on Motion, and it automatically ports into Final Cut Pro. I can then copy a music file direct from Logic into Final Cut Pro if I want to match it up with the pictures. You can put videos into Final Cut Pro or into Logic to work to. And those days, it was always a nightmare because they either wouldn't sync up, or they ran slow, or they'd crash, or everything like that. So today, I mean, when we recorded this album I talked to you about in the mid-'80s, we had a keyboard player who came in and he synced up to my Atari program. And he had the massive array of sounds. And they were created by these sound modules. Now, this one here, which I'll show you, it was made by Roland. And what the manufacturers found out was a lot of people were buying the keyboards, but when they wanted more sounds, they didn't want to buy another keyboard with those sounds in. So what the manufacturers cleverly sussed out was that if they brought out a module like that had all the sounds of the keyboard, but with no keys on it, you could link them all together by MIDI. So you had one master keyboard like that, except that's the smaller one, but a master keyboard, which then was MIDI'd into all these different modules, which then you got your program up, and then you selected which sound you wanted from which module in the program.
I love the thing about being able to play piano in slow motion, and the ability you have now. So Logic Pro is an audio editor, Final Cut Pro is a video editor. What's Motion?
Motion is an amazing piece of software. It links into Final Cut Pro, and basically it's effects. It allows you. I think I can possibly show you. I've got loads of stuff. Didn't prepare this very well, did I? Motion allows me to make like little special effects that I want to use. So here's, for instance, this is an intro. Can you see it? Can you see it all right? So this is an intro. So that's just something I put together for a new video that I'm doing, and it enables. It's got the most fantastic things like a replicator, where you can put an image in, and then it will replicate it 1,000 different ways, and it's mind-boggling. So,
oh, sorry, my mind's gone off in two different directions. Let me get rid of what I hope is a simpler one. You've been doing this a long time. You had this horrendous history of problems with it all.
Yes.
Would you say that now, with that MacBook, with Logic and Motion and Final Cut, all your problems are over and it just works?
Yes, absolutely. Motion, I mean, it's an unbelievably complicated piece of kit, and I'm finding things new about it every day, but it seamlessly links with Final Cut Pro. The two work alongside each other. So if I that little sequence I showed you there, I can actually port that directly into Final Cut Pro. So it comes up in a little file, and then I can just drop it onto the timeline. And equally, I can have a sequence in Final Cut Pro that I can drop into Motion to put it, say, into 3D, or to actually manipulate it, or drop things in, or whatever I want to do with it, and then drop it back out again. So that it's just it's how they all talk to each other that's amazing, and equally Logic, which I had running before. I mean, this piece of kit is just unbelievable, and for the price, I mean, I'm not doing an advert for Mac here, but for the price, the stuff that you get in it is frightening.
there is an obvious question here. You are a bass guitarist.
Yes.
Have you bought any plugins for bass guitar? And if you have, are they as good as you?
There are plugins that are in there, but this little chap here on the top, that's the digital interface, and I can get one of my guitars, plug it in there. It goes into via USB into the side and comes up, and I can play it into there, and then I can edit it afterwards. So
okay.
I can do it two ways. I mean, I actually did one where I programmed the bass part, and then I doubled it by playing it and mixed the two together. So I got a really deep, growly sound, but then I got a real string sound in it as well, which gave it a sort of tonal quality that was really interesting.
I said that my mind went off in two directions. I realised the other one it's really broad, and it's going to demonstrate how I know nothing about music. The idea, and somebody who doesn't write will have the idea that we sit here and we compose one word after another, and if they, no reason they should think about it, but if they do, they realise we might shape and fashion and edit it. It seems to me that that's what you're doing with all of this gear. You are creating certain things, you are editing them, moving them around. You're not actually sitting there with a pen and paper first, you're kind of writing it through your technology. Is it a writing muscle in your head, do you think, or is it something else? Is writing like this small part and the rest follows?
You can get sequences, you can get software where like a traditional musician, say like a Beethoven or somebody like that, and you can use it to write in the notation, and it will play. So for a traditional composer who would not do it like a keyboard way, but would do it out of his head and think, I want to go da 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 da, and he knows what that looks like, and he writes it. He can write that on a stave of music, and it will play it.
Goodness.
You can. I mean, I've used that because at one point I had a big band, I had a 12-piece big band, and I had 8 brass players, so 2 trumpets, 2 trombones, 4 saxes, and I did all the arrangements using this notation software, and then was able to print it out and take it to the guys, and they played it.
I'm very conscious if I'm on stage performing a piece and I think the audience doesn't like it, I speed up, cut things out, get to the end and get off as fast as possible. Whereas presumably if you start a 3-minute song, it's going to take 3 minutes or so. So you are thinking in time as well. You're thinking rhythm and pace, which is definitely a writer's tool.
Yes. Obviously, if you can't just have a piece of music and cut something out and not take any notice of the tempo, or you have to. You get used to it. You can look at something and you can see the waveforms and the peaks and the troughs, and you know that. Say, for instance, I'm doing a sequence of videos at the minute with this friend of mine. It's actually from the album that I told you about that we recorded back in the 80s, which is out now, and we're doing a sequence of short promos for YouTube that we can put on Facebook. They're only a minute long because people don't if they don't know the piece of music, they don't really want to listen to a 3-minute piece. They will be interested in hearing it for a minute, and if they like it, they can then go and find the full length version. But what I'm doing is some of them I'm taking a little bit of the intro, a little bit of the first verse, and then I might even take a chorus from the end of the song and put them together to make them a minute. Now, obviously, those have got to flow. They can't, and you've got to listen because you might have a different sound overlapping and things like that. So there is more of an art in it. But I know for a fact that if I'm going to make a really sharp edit, you look for a snare drum, a bang, so that if you edit on that snare drum, it's going to sync in with everything else. Whereas if you try and edit anywhere near it, you're always struggling because it's just the dynamics that you want in the edit. So you always look for like a bass drum or a snare drum or something like that would join the two together. So you would look for the snare drum in the chorus that you want, and you'd look for the snare drum at the end of the verse you want, and that would then enable you know full well that as that snare drum hits, it's going to lead into the next section.
I was thinking when I cut a paragraph out of a story, I think of it as the bridge is gone. I need to smooth the join over, but I can just write a new sentence or recast the sentence that's there. I presume it's not very easy for you to think, I need 12 bars of something. I'll just go off and record something new.
No, it's that's where the music side of it is a little bit more complicated. I mean, say for instance, if I'm doing one of these promos and we film a lot on green screen, I always make sure that I've got a lot more footage than I need, because I know full well at some point or other I'm going to have to put something in because that didn't work or whatever. So I've always got more. But music, yeah, it can be very frustrating when you're trying to do an edit and you just can't find the right piece to go in that space, because maybe you've used a different sound, and so the original sound is there, and then you drop the piece you want, but that sound changes, and that sound, so it goes like that, instead of seamlessly dropping in. You can do crossfades, so things don't exactly jar, but you can drop a crossfade between the two, so it'd be nice, smooth, and a smooth join. Instead of like that, it becomes like that. And you don't notice it so much.
You were saying to me before we started talking this that 58 Keys is for writers. There's an argument that you're actually a composer, not a writer, but you tend to say writer. Is that? Did I get that right?
Yeah, well, there is this weird thing. I noticed in PRS, you when you register a song, it says composer and writer. So I'm thinking that, you've got the old composers like Beethoven and Tchaikovsky, and they were composers, so they composed music. But I would assume what they're saying is the writer writes the words, is the lyricist. So, you get the composer, the writer. People do it all, so it doesn't matter. But that is, I think, is the difference between the two. The writer is the person who would write the lyrics, whereas the composer is the person who composes the music.
So actually, it sounds like you are both and more. You are a writer and you're a composer. You are a complete sound recording studio. In fact, your MacBook behind you is everything.
Yeah. Well, what I had said before, this guy who had all these boxes of sounds, about 20, 30 of those, he then became aware, having gone through all this phase of the Atari and things crashing and whatever, that suddenly there was this MacBook Pro and all these VST, these instruments, and all in one piece of equipment. So he got rid of all his stuff and invested in the biggest possible MacBook Pro that he could get, with the most memory that was possible to put in one, and got all these sound modules as VST instruments. And he had exactly the same thing. And they sound the same. They're all digital, so they all sound the same anyway. And he then he got rid of his van, and he could have gone and put it in his bag and gone on his bike. The Sad Cafe thing that when we did our video, we all did it at home.
Every single day that I'm without you, it hurts just a little bit more than I've ever been hurt before.
It's what a lot of people are doing, these lockdown videos. everybody's got now has got pretty much this similar situation. So you need someone to start off. So maybe the keyboard player starts off, and he's got a click going, and he does his part, and then he sends it to me, and I put my bass part down, and then the drummer comes in and he plays drums to it, and then the guitar gets it, and he's got his little studio, and then send it off to the singers who do their bits, and that's how it all goes along.
This is unimaginable compared to how it was when you started.
Oh, unbelievably so. Yes.
I think fair to say you know what you're doing. I mean, all the production work, television work, which we haven't really touched on, all sorts of things. You have all these skills, you write all of this stuff, you have all of this technology, and yet, if I've worked it out right on my fingers, it's taken you 37 years to get that album out.
Yes, how amazing! And the weird thing was, I'll give her a plug. She's called Sissy Stone. We wrote it together in the 80s, and we recorded it in a big studio up in Liverpool called Amazon, which is no longer there, onto 2-inch multi-track tape. So we, for reasons I won't go into, it never got released. And we've had the 2-inch multi-track tapes for 30-something years in the bottom of the wardrobe. And when the company, they're an American company who heard it and loved it and wanted to sign it, we actually FedExed the tapes over to them. And what they had to do, they had to bake the tapes because, and I found this out because one of my other things is writing books, as you well know. And one of the little subplots I had going involved, because there's a bit of music involved in it, of course. It came up about this, and it's called sticky shed syndrome. And basically what happens is the tape is plastic based, but then the covering, the actual surface is put on, which is the magnetic surface where all the data is recorded. And over time, that gets damp and it can pull away from the plastic, the base. And if they would have done it, if they would have just taken it out of the box, put it on a machine and played it, it could have stripped the surface off the tape. So what they have to do is they have to put it in a very, very low oven for 24 hours, which bakes the surface back onto the tape. And then you get about 2 or 3 runs before it starts to degrade. So what they do is they link it up to the computer and just assign all those 24 tracks. So they just assign all 24 tracks to the 24 tracks on there, to press record and just play it. And it records it straight in. And then they've got it. Then they save it onto hard drive and back it up to another hard drive. And then they can do whatever, you can rearrange it all. In those days, obviously, you couldn't do that. I mean, to edit, you couldn't edit it because it was on a tape. So if you wanted to, you thought afterwards, well, I wish I'd have done that then. The only way to do it is go back and re-record it. Now, you just click, cut and paste.
Right. That's almost boring now, isn't it?
Yeah, but the album's called Stonewall, and it's
Stonewall.
on Fervor Records. And like I say, we're doing these little promos, which they're all different. They're all very inventive. I try and be inventive with each one I do. Use different processes. So they're worth a watch. So I'll get you to put a link onto it.
Oh, you bet.
But I've got to say your 58 keys, because I'm a follower of your 58 keys. Mm-hmm. And just recently, Spotlight. I love the sequence on Spotlight because I'd never really used that, and now I don't. Now I'm always using it because just having seen you talk about it. And the other thing as well is the double tap on the back of the phone, on the iPhone, which I didn't know about. And that, for me, because Spotify, if I hear a piece of music, and I think you said the same thing, if you hear a piece of music and you're thinking to yourself, what's that piece of music? And by the time it's gone, well, you can, if you got your phone, you just go like that, and Spotify comes up straight away and you got it.
Yes.
So,
brilliant. Well, glad to have been of service. I'll put links to all of that as well.
Yeah.
Listen, Dez Tong, considering I'm not a musician at all, you've made this very easy for me to understand. Thank you for it. I take it the album, the album's out now. So the current project you're doing are these promo videos. Do you know what you're going to be doing next? Is there a Stonewall 2 album?
Well, we're sort of deciding which way to go, really. We are going to do some more writing. But as I said this before, I've been writing books, which I really got hooked up on it. The first one I did a couple of years ago, and I loved it. I just so much enjoyed it. And the weird thing it was never on my bucket list to write a book. Never. I never thought. I love reading books, but never in a million years I thought I could write one. And it came about because of a TV show that I did where myself and Bevan, the drummer, drove around Birmingham talking about all the old places, all the old venues and bands and things like that. And I realised nostalgia was how important it was, because people used to stop me in the street, and still do, to say how much they enjoyed the show and how the memories it brought back. Oh, I met my wife in that club, and things like that. So I thought, well, it'd be great to write a book like that. But instead of it being factual, which would be a nightmare because the research would be horrendous. Somebody would say, oh, no, they didn't play there on Tuesday. It was a Monday they played there, So I went away from that, and I invented my own characters and my own stories, but used the vibe of the nostalgia.
I'm sorry. I watched that show. I'm far too young to have any nostalgic memories of the places, but I watched that. It was a really good series you did.
Yeah.
However, you've now just basically admitted it's easier to make things up. Dez Tong, you're a writer. That's perfect.
April Smith said, you asked her about something and you said about research. And she said, yes, I went over to this place and I researched it. Then I came back and I put it somewhere else and I made it up. So, that's what I did.
Dez, stop me. I'll keep you here forever. Thank you so much for doing this. It is brilliant. And there will be links to everything of yours below. Brilliant. Dez Tong, writer, musician, composer, producer, bass player. Yes. Thank you very much.
Brilliant. Thank you.
Do you know, I think I've got, the thing about the links below. I think I've got more links below for this than any 58 Keys episode I've ever done. Do check it all out. I mean, there's the Sad Cafe lockdown video, the full version's down there. Dez Tong's Stonewall promos that he showed you how he makes as Sissy Stone's album with Dez by itself. Multiple editions actually of 58 Keys that he plugged. I knew I liked that man. Dez's interview that you've just seen is now part of a 58 Keys playlist full of interviews with writers and musicians and producers, and that's partly in thanks to the UK's Arts Council who've made all that possible. Thank you to them. I'm very grateful. Thank you to you, though, for watching this episode of 58 Keys, this special edition of 58 Keys. Now, take care of yourself, write more, okay? And I'll see you soon.